planning for years that are far into the future. So I'm assuming that you have a plan, or there is something else that's being retired or something that would, I don't know, Catherine, that would give you the reason to believe that 250,000 in for 3 years is not going to be a heavy lift.
So President Paul, if you see at the end of the memo,
Did I miss something? I'm
so
sorry.
you haven't really missed something, but it is in there, and I think it goes to your question, which is that I've asked Jeff and Chapin to come back and present the board in the next 3 to 6 months with basically a plan to ensure that this is a plan to ensure that they will be able to pay it off on the schedule. This is an area where, to some degree, we control the future revenues through policy decisions that we make, and it's been quite a few years now since there have been really adjustments to policy or rates that could generate additional revenues. There's no reluctance to do that for, I think, good reason during the pandemic and immediate years after. We may well need to make some decisions in the future, such as something that has been out there for years that we've been hesitated from doing it. We don't charge anything in the garages on Sundays. That's a kind of policy that may need to be reevaluated if the revenues don't recover kind of organically on their own. And there are other decisions like that that are within our control. So this gives us 5 years to figure this out, and I've asked for a written report that we would present to you and get approval on 3 to 6 months from then.
Okay, so I actually read the payments and didn't read the last paragraph. So that was in there, and obviously you covered that. I mean, it's not the ideal situation. I mean, I think we should all be honest about that. This is not the ideal situation. And of course, the other thing I wonder is, I mean, is it possible, the rate 375, I don't know, it just seems, I mean, I understand that that was the bond council's, that was the recommendation. I wonder if there aren't, I don't know if there aren't there isn't another solution to this, and I don't know what it is, but I don't know if it's far away from ourselves or if there's some other way that we could do that, and maybe less. I don't know, but it does. It's not the ideal situation. I mean, I'll support it, but it does sort of. I think it's unfortunate, but 3 to 5 months, 3 to 6 months, we'll look forward with great anticipation to the ideas are that.
Right. Should be pretty robust.
Okay. I can't wait.
Me too. Thanks, President Paul. I understand your perspective and largely, I think it's worth. This is probably the area of the city's finances that were hit most heavily and permanently by the pandemic. We just haven't seen, whereas all the other revenue streams have largely recovered. Parking, it's probably the flip side of what the good news we were reporting last week, that people are driving less and that emissions are down. Certainly, people are coming into work less. That's one of the major revenue drivers of the garage. So this is an area where we've really been dealing with both many a long list of deferred maintenance to address, as well as kind of these larger economic forces. I agree with you that I think it's really important that we follow up and make good on what is said here, that there needs to be a plan that comes back early in this loan, so that we definitely have a way forward. I think it's a manageable, I'm confident this is a manageable number. We can work our way through unless we like forget about it, neglect it. And this, I'm glad we're having this conversation to make sure we're all on the same page. This needs to come back for some tough decisions potentially, or not overly dramatize it, but we got to make sure we don't kick the can down the road here and ignore this. We may need to make some changes. And that's Councilor Barlow. Sorry, did you want to get back to that? Councilor Barlow?
Yeah, I just had a question about sort of the mechanics of the repayment. So there's no payment, not even interest payments in year 1 and 2?
There is interest payment.
There are interest payments.
There's interest payment on year 1 and 2, and then.
And then
there's 250 plus.
Okay, got it. Well, that one says
Oh,
zero.
that's
So there, that, so it's
Okay.
moving fast last
Okay,
week, so.
okay, I was just wondering if the interest was getting
So, yes,
put into the
there's-
last 3 years. Okay,
Yes.
I understand.
Sorry.
well, if I
Can
may
we
say, I
update
mean,
that on
that's-
the-
Yeah,
And
thank you.
can we make a note in the, we should update the document. So this documentation looks like there's no payments here.
Yeah, no, there's interest payments, interest 1 and 2, and then principal and interest in 3.5.
Very good.
And there was also, I got a last minute edit. Resolution.
Yeah,
That I submitted also, so I don't know. if that-
okay. Yeah, that edit was grammatical, yeah,
Yeah, that's correct.
okay.
So maybe if we take action on this shortly, can we work with Lori or
Yeah, you gotta clear it up.
terms posted.
Yes.
Great. Any further discussion or questions? Are we ready for our work on this?
I will move the recommended action.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow. You have a second? I'm happy to second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. If we can,
We look forward to being back with you to work through the pro forma and assumptions that we have to return these two funds to health.
And you'll be able.
The revised memo. Yes, we will work with DTL to get that up immediately. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks. Okay, we have 2 more items on this special board finance meeting. Item number 2 is the annual appropriation and budget for fiscal year in July 1st, 2023 and ending June 30th, 2024. And then we will talk about the kind of companion resolution, which is the tax assessments. How would the board like to proceed? We have a PowerPoint that Catherine has prepared for the full council discussion. It's I think entirely made up of information that's been shared in prior PowerPoint presentations with the board, so we could go through that or maybe be more efficient to go straight to any comments or questions that the board would like to make. We will be making the full presentation at the council since the body hasn't seen everything all at once. So how would the board like us to proceed here?
Well, I mean, I personally, if we're going to see if we're going to see the presentation and it's effectively unchanged from the one that was on the 12th, is that about right? The
It
12th of
is.
June, the one that I mean, I wasn't here for that Board of Finance meeting, but I did look back at the.
It is a combination of that one and one from the 1st of June to kind of get everyone up to speed. The idea is that the three of you and Counselor Jang have been along for this journey and the other counselors maybe not. So to provide like a full overview of kind of where we've been up to now. But it is all, I just took slides from everything you've already seen. I just put them into one new slide deck, but I did not create new content.
If that's the case, I mean, personally, I don't, I mean, I don't need to see it again unless other people others have too.
I wasn't planning to bore you with it, but I certainly can.
Okay, then, so let's, my hope, although, I think maybe, can't quite remember, this is the 12th budget that I've been responsible for. The great majority of others, the Board of Finance has taken action, making a recommendation on the budget, one way or another before the council voted. I think there have been one or two times, one for whatever reason, the board chose not to do that, so it's not an absolute requirement, but the idea that we, as we discussed on the 12th, was that we would attempt to do that and convene this meeting ahead of time. So, it would certainly, I think, yeah, that's the purpose of us really gathering, and I would welcome, if you want to put a motion to that effect on the floor. I think that's one thing that we can do now, or we can have further discussion if board members would prefer.
Well, I don't need to make a motion. I can certainly make a comment if that would be helpful.
Great.
So I have, as probably everyone knows, and certainly anyone on Facebook knows, I did have a period of time where I was not as I typically engaged in the process as I usually am, due to circumstances beyond my control, good circumstances, but nevertheless a little bit more challenging. And certainly tried to keep tabs on what was going. I did not see, and there haven't been minutes that I've seen posted for the the June 12th Board of Finance meeting. I basically went off the conversations that I had with people about that meeting, and then also the PowerPoint, which was pretty much unchanged. I mean, maybe there were a few missing, but I mean, I think it was mostly the same. I guess the only thing that I will say is that I don't think I've ever, all the years that I've served on the city council, I don't think I've ever interacted with a city councilor who wants to vote no on a budget. Because it's a huge document. It's the most important thing that we do all year, and because it sets the priorities for the coming year. And I never give up hope that there is an opportunity to find a middle ground. Collaboration, compromise. I'm not saying that I lay no fault with any one person, any two people. I take responsibility for it myself. I think that there still are opportunities just within the normal fluidity of an entity this size, that there is $290,000 that over the course of this year would present itself in such a way that effectively no public safety, no non-union, no current non-union positions are affected. All of the principles that I believe you would put out in the narrative could still be honored and still have a way to have a meeting of the mind. So the streets get done in the way that we want them to get done, and people feel that taxes have not, that we have done the absolute even further best we can do. We've already done the best we can do. Now we're talking about the best. And I think, because they're line items in a budget, it's hard to really go line by line. And I feel like doing that in a public setting probably isn't fair because some of them are either vacant positions that soon become vacant that really are not appropriate to talk about publicly. So I don't really want to go into all the nuances. I'll give you one example and then maybe that would lead to some sort of a discussion. So Catherine, you know, I asked you about line 7850. 7850, for those who are not as well versed in line 7850, and I want anyone to raise their hand if they know what line 7850 is. Okay. All right. Do you know what line 7850 is? All right. Well, now we're all going to know. So line 7850 is contingency. And line 7850 in FY20 and FY19 was around $3,000 that was spent. Last year, it was budgeted for $100,000. This year, right now, as we live and breathe, FY23. According to Catherine, 22,000 of that has been spent. So 100,000, 22,000. Now, of course, the word contingency means contingency. That means if we already know that it's going to happen, it's somewhere else. If we don't know it's going to happen, well, we don't know it's going to happen. So we certainly have to plan for that. This year's line item contingency is 175,000, which begs the question, if it was 100,000 last year, and we've gone through an entire year, we've gone through 3 years of incredibly difficult and challenging pandemic uncertainties, is it possible that the 175 could at least be level funded for this year? I haven't asked you that question. I apologize. I don't mean to put you on the spot. And I'm not saying that 175 isn't realistic, but let's just try to see if maybe 175 could be 100. Well, you get a little bit closer and a little bit closer. There are, again, I can't really go into all the little nuances. I started calculating it myself, and even based on 1 month, I think there are opportunities to at least go half of that, of the 290. But that's me as someone who doesn't know all of the intricacies of every little line item, of every little department, of every big department. I can't pinpoint all of that. What I can say is that in the past, there have been times where we have done budgets where we have either put placeholders in, knowing that over the course of a year, there will be other opportunities in an $80 million budget to find those little smaller amounts. Or when there are things that we've really wanted to do, we have said we will revisit this in 6 months and we will find some of those efficiencies, vacancies, attrition, whatever they may be. So I guess what I'm saying is that, you know, I think that it is tremendously powerful and sets a wonderful tone for the coming year if we as a body are able to find a way to honor all of the priorities that are important for the administration and all the priorities that are important for those who must vote on the budget. And that's where I will leave it. We don't usually legislate in this way. Probably if I had been here on the 12th of June, I probably would be saying this now and not saying this then and not now. As I say, I know there's only a couple of hours here, but I still feel that we should at least have that opportunity. And I would just ask you if you think that there is that opportunity in a way that we could find a meeting of the minds. So those are my comments. I won't be saying anything at the council meeting. I'm saying it now. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Great. Thank you, President Paul. I certainly understand. Sorry, do we raise a hand?
If you want to respond to that, I'd be speaking.
Why don't you go ahead and you can comment first, and then I'll respond to this.
Sure. Always appreciate Paul trying to find a way for us to come to a compromise and be able to vote yes. And sometimes we're just not going to get there. And have a hard time seeing us getting there in the 2 hours we have, and we're likely to vote on the budget, finding a solution that we couldn't find in the last 8 weeks of these conversations. And I would have a hard time trusting that whatever we found to try to come up with that additional money without raising taxes. I would have a hard time making that decision without knowing the full impact of deciding where we're going to pull that from. And so, while I appreciate that effort, I don't think, at least from my perspective, is the counselor planning to vote no tonight. And that us having that conversation between now and 5:45 or 6:30, whenever we're discussing the budget of the full council, that I would feel comfortable making that decision, changing my vote between now and then. So I was going to save my longer comments for the full council, and I think I still will. So I guess I will just leave it there for now.
Okay, Councilor McGee, and President Paul, thank you for those comments. I appreciate where you're both coming from with those comments. Something I will repeat when we're upstairs. I in many ways think this, of the 12 budgets I've been responsible for, was the most difficult. We have been grappling with just a host of difficult forces and issues, many of which are sort of beyond our direct control. We, for a second year in a row, are facing historic inflation. We have continued volatility and we've just been discussing some shortfalls related to disruptions of the pandemic. We made some big changes to our programs and our efforts to, at a local level, address equity issues in prior budgets. And we took on the challenge of phasing that out over 3 years, and we're in the 3rd year of that phase out. The last year that there is some federal support for those, we have kept those equity commitments high, and the federal support for them is going away, as we knew it would, and that had to be absorbed and digested in this budget. And we're also trying to be sensitive to our constituents who face rising costs in pretty much all aspects of their life, and we don't want to make city government undue additional burden. So with all those constraints, this has been a very tough budget to complete. I think we can. I think there's a lot to President Paul, your point. I think there is a lot to be proud of and excited about in this budget. Despite all that, this continues to advance the city, advance the community in numerous important ways. It continues our efforts to rebuild and really retool the police department and improve and change the way we deliver public safety. It continues our major commitment to improving our infrastructure. It continues our commitment to those equity commitments I was just talking about, including a fully funded and reorganized REIB department. It, for the first time, has nearly $200,000 in it for opioid related interventions. It's the first time we're able to, here's some place where we're able to use new revenues that are coming to us from the opioid settlements and deliver progress, and more. So to deliver all that while also overcoming these challenges, we have had to
push very hard in areas and really push up to the edge of what I'm comfortable budgeting for. We are one of the complicated projections we do every year is around attrition and around, sort of to your point, President Paul, what's gonna happen in the normal course of business that's going to end up saving us money because positions are not refilled as quickly because vacancies come up. We have really pushed those assumptions, for example, we doubled our attrition numbers in many departments from what we have in the past. That in the face of that, and frankly, knowing how challenging it has been to control personnel costs since the pandemic, because of our challenges competing in the workforce, because of inflationary pressures. And I think we did explain this somewhere. We did feel that it was prudent to bump back up the contingency number from 100,000 to 175,000. In contrast, we have had some years that it's been as much as 500,000. It's been a long time. It's been a while since we've done that, but it's certainly not a historically large contingency number. I think it represents on a $100 million budget. It is quite a small contingency. So I appreciate the sentiment that it is. So a lot of the budgets of the last 12 years have been unanimous budgets, and we have worked hard for that. And Councilor McGee and I did have some communications over the past week exploring whether there was a way to come to a meeting of minds. We haven't gotten there yet. I'm hearing, and I respect McGee, your sense that it'd be tough to bridge that gap now. So that's my kind of reaction to the last two comments, I guess. And I guess I would hope that with Councilor McGee's point, that maybe it would be possible. Well, are we in a position to make a recommendation on this budget at this point as a board?
Well, given we sort of know where everybody's at this point, I would be happy to recommend the action, just make it to recommend the budget resolution of this.
Thank you, Councilor Barlow.
I'll second.
Thank you, President Paul. Would anyone like to make any further comment? Councilor McGee.
I'll just say briefly before I don't know for the first time. I recognize that we're in a challenging budget year, and I recognize that future budget years are going to be even more challenging. We have local matches on a number of infrastructure projects that we still don't have a funding source for. That we have vehicles that need replacing, the deferred list that's going to grow even longer in the coming years with purchase moratorium, and that the cost of living increases that we negotiated as part of the union contract will also add additional pressure to future budget years. And with all of those things, with those being the predictable things that we see coming at us in the future, I see a need to increase taxes potentially next year, year after that. I think this year we were able to find a way to bridge the deficit that you all brought us at the beginning of the budget conversation, to have a budget that met the needs that we had, without cutting staff or services, and I appreciated that very much. But for us to ask for an additional amount beyond what was planned for this year in terms of paving and patching. We all know the streets that are in dire need of improvement. I'm not unaware of that. But to ask people for more this year, when we know there are definitely going to be years in the future where we're going to maybe even have to ask for a larger tax increase, I can't support that this year. And I think this is now is the most important time for us to be talking about more sustainable ways for us to fund city services going forward, because it's clear that with the reappraisal, the property tax is not going to be a sustainable method for us to fund so many of the infrastructure improvements that we need, maintaining essential city services that people have come to expect. We need to find a better way to do this, and I hope that we can do that over the next year, over the next 2 years. And work with the legislature to do that. So I'm gonna have to go to Montpelier to get any approval on these things. Changing the way the state is funded education and services for decades is not going to be an easy task, but I think it's imperative that we make those efforts. So with that, I will not be supporting this tonight.
Thank you for being so transparent, Councilor McGee, on your thinking. I do want to make sure, we have a number of councilors here, we've got the public watching. I want to make sure that it's my understanding. I think you just articulated this, but we've lost your vote on this over the 0.5 cent increase to the streets tax that is in the budget that is before you. This it is true, was not it's accurate that when we began at the beginning of May, our kind of draft budget, that that increase was not in the initial discussions. I think this is an example of how that process is not intended to be just a kind of pro forma process. The idea is to engage you, the board, and the public, and full council in our thinking when it's still in draft form. And in this case, after viewing the street work that was going to get done in the coming year, and understanding that we are below the voter approved caps for the street tax by a couple cents, I believe. We started discussing in response to councilor feedback, whether that there might be some, and really understanding that because of our constraints, the street patching budget was going to be very limited this year. That's when this discussion of additional 0.5 cent, which what is for the average taxpayer, just to, again, it's clear what we're talking about here.
It is just over $1 a month. Hang on, it's in this other PowerPoint.
Okay, if Catherine gets that figure, I'll just finish the point. So this
$1.54 a month.
so that's, and it's not going to be the same for everybody. That's on a $370,000 home, because that's the median or the average home.
Median.
The median home per the most recent assessment. And what's here's the difference that 0.5 cent is going to make is it's going to the city engineer Norm Baldwin is here. He has projected with the initial budget we were talking about there being a approximately $450,000 deficit in our patching need citywide for the upcoming year. And with this change, we'll still have a deficit. We'll have reduced that deficit by more than 50%. It'll be an under $200,000 deficit, and that will allow us to get more patching done citywide, and we'll be on first arterials and then neighborhood streets is the kind of way that the patching is prioritized to basically get that right.
Arterial streets, collector streets, and
I missed one, that's right.
So the biggest bang for the buck is the arterial streets. And obviously, there's a secondary review that relates to how bad of a condition the road is in terms of the volume of patches needed. So it's our best way of kind of spreading those funds to the specific targeted need so that we have serviceable roads come springtime through the winter. I think that's our biggest concern. Obviously, our preferred choice would be to really fully repair and redevelop streets. But if we were to fix one street and then leave all those other streets kind of in a severe state of disrepair through the winter season, spring, so it makes sense to, at least on a triage basis, deal with the patching and fix these kind of problem areas. But even with the half-cent, we're not achieving problem solving all patching. But it is where we are, and that's what we're gonna work with to make the best of the, what is not really a great situation, but is reality we're living with.
And I guess just to finish the point, I mean, from my perspective, while it is accurate that there is some additional cost in this budget, if it's passed with that additional half-cent in there, the nature of the patching slows the deterioration of roads, and it is an attempt to, is a preventive maintenance attempt that has some benefit in sustaining the assets that we have and to reducing future costs. And so I think it's at least debatable whether this eliminating this half-cent increase would actually reduce whether that's really a true savings or whether it's going to sort of be result in future costs. Although we don't, I think it's tough to totally project that sitting here right now, but that's what the patching is intended for. That's the way we will spend it. So if there's no further comment, I think we're ready for a vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Any opposed? No. Motion carries 3-1. We didn't combine these. So there is one more on the agenda, which is the tax resolution.
Yeah.
Always thought it was a little lucky that we did these as separate actions, and then I don't quite know what would happen if we pass one and not the other. Certainly, they are companion bills, if you will. So I'm not sure that we need further discussion. Maybe we could have a motion on that as well.
Sure, I'll move the recommendation.
Second.
Thank you, President Paul. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Great. One opposed. So you stand. Okay, well, former Board of Finance member, Councilor Hightower, do you count that in there? I don't think that's just a 3-1 vote with budgets. That completes our warrant agenda.
Mayor, just have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Councilor.
Sorry,
Carpenter.
that's it's more of a comment and a question about where we're at. Over a year ago, Councilman McGee and I worked with Councilman McGee, put a resolution in asking the city to do effectively an analysis of taxation, particularly property taxation, and how, among other things, how the homestead sensitivity related to the city of Burlington. We realized at the time of that resolution, it's complicated to get the information because we were in the middle of the reappraisal. And so doing all the math is complicated. We're now this year at a point where that's sort of settled. We know that 70% of citizens get some sort of equalization, but we don't really have it drilled down. And I really think it would behoove us to understand that. I mean, the cutoff is actually up to $140,000 a year. The more major cutoff is up to 90,000. People below 90,000 get a pretty significant homestead credit. And we need to understand how that matches up with the people in Burlington. Because it's based on people's income, there's a lot of issues with the tax department on how to get that analyzed. And I think that resolution asks the city to employ a consultant to do it, but I just strongly encourage it, particularly going into the session next year, going into a city budget year where we know we're gonna have increases because of high school. We need to understand how how good or not good that credit is. And I think it's better than we expect, but we don't know that, we just don't know that. And I really encourage us to follow through on that analysis.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Carpenter, and actually it reminds me what in my long response to Councilor McGee, I meant to mention another thing that I think we should feel good about this budget is that it recognizes that we do have major challenges coming in future years, both because of the trends that we talked about previously and additional trends like the cost of the new high school and the impact that has on our bonding capacity and other pressures. And so in this budget, we are funding a number of studies that will look at operating efficiencies, that will look at our fleet, that will look at how alternative ways of funding some of the activities within CETO and a HUD funded effort and more. This combines with some ongoing studies that are underway. So something, anyone who's just tuning in now, something we've talked about repeatedly at this board is that over the first, we are going to push to bring those studies back as quickly as possible so that over the first 6 months of the coming year, we are really looking to the future challenges and being in a strong position for those future budgets. And certainly we can make sure, Councilor Carpenter, that we have the best data we have about who gets those homestead exemptions as part of that.
Two other comments because I think the math of that program was like a black box, but
Sure. That is
but property value caps and income caps and if there's things that could be fixed, we need to know that.
great. And we do, have this, one of those studies is referencing this in the field that I think is adjacent to what you're saying is this property tax equity study that is going to have a lot of really interesting information along these lines as well. So thank you everyone for your patience with that sort of extracurricular discussion here. Now, seeing no objection, the business being done, I will adjourn the Board of Finance at 5. What time?
5:52.
Thank you. We'll see everybody upstairs.